Efficiency is using the least amount of resources possible to achieve the goal. As an editor, you direct the writer to avoid dull, chunky paragraphs to achieve his goal, a clear and concise message. And as you already guessed, cutting inefficient phrases and words is one way to do it. But before we begin, here is an interesting inefficient fact you didn't know. A particular solar panel can convert only 20% of available solar energy to electricity under ideal conditions. Imagine how many energy problems we could have solved if solar panels were more efficient. As an editor, you should remove wordy phrases that your reader may regard as extra or inefficient. Let's have a look at some. Your aim is to be familiar with as many inefficient phrases as possible. During editing, open your eyes for both familiar and new inefficient phrases and replace each one with a tighter word. Fortunately for you, I attached a pre-made list to the lesson or course resources, so don't forget to check it out. Omit fact phrases. Phrases like "in fact," "as a matter of fact," and "the fact is" should be removed. These phrases don't add anything to the message. In fact, they are a loophole for readers to stop reading. Or, as I should say, without "in fact," they are a loophole for readers to stop reading. Exclude them as soon as they pop up. Avoid negative phrases. Negative sentences often confuse readers and make them work harder to grasp the message. The words "no" and "not" are signs for a possible tangled negative sentence. Here are a few examples. "No more than" can be replaced with "at most." "I'm not crazy about the movie, but for its aesthetics element" can be replaced with "I only like the movie's aesthetic elements." "I will not go to the market unless I have to" can be replaced with "I will only go to the market if necessary." You can leave negative sentences that aren't too complex and can't be tighter as they are. Yet, always check negative sentences to see if their positive version is clearer. Some words are used often, but usually can and should be omitted for sentence efficiency. However, before the showcase begins, here is another interesting inefficient fact. A standard incandescent light bulb converts about 2% of its energy consumption to light and 98% to heat. Talk about inefficient. The. Remove the when you talk about a general group. For example, Muslim women wear hijab. Cats are great pets. Also, the should be removed if repeated in a list. For example, the 20s and the 30s. Saying the twice is unnecessary, as long as they are not interrupted by other words. Note that this doesn't apply for e or n, as they should always appear before a singular noun. Really, a lot, or often. Saying something is really tall means you're too lazy to write exactly how much. How tall is it? Quantify it. Swap these vague terms for a more accurate description. Instead of saying that the Empire State Building is quite tall, tell the numbers and amaze the readers even more. Believe and think. People are more interested in the facts than they are in vague thoughts. Even if you are writing an opinion piece, readers should understand that based on the context. Combine I with stronger, more impactful verbs and make a sharper tone for the writer. Just. Uses of just to imply something small or inefficient don't add anything to the sentence. In most cases, you can remove the word just without affecting the sentence meaning. For example, I barely arrived in time, or like when we first met. Both sentences don't really need just. I want to clarify that using just as an adjective or rather than the word only is alright. Using just to quantify, that's wrong. That and then. To smooth your text, remove the words that and then whenever the sentence makes sense without them. And don't start sentences with then because it makes them clunky and difficult to read. For example, one of the kids said lots of the old places down here had secret rooms. Yet, be mindful not to remove that or then if it might confuse the readers and disturb the sentence message. For example, the governor announced his new tax plan would be introduced soon. Without that, the reader's first impression is that the plan itself was announced moments ago. Thus, this sentence does need that for clarity. Literally and virtually. Both words are often superfluous. Remove or replace them with something more descriptive and precise. Usually, these words don't add information to the sentence. Eliminate them at all costs. Sorry, I will be less dramatic. Useless adverbs. Completely, entirely, certainly, absolutely, obviously, suddenly, and undoubtedly. You can remove them from any sentence without affecting its meaning. Use more descriptive terms in their place. Adverbs are vague, dull, and tend to prolong already confusing sentences. In a future lesson, I will show you how to catch and omit them, plus explain why. Very. Deleting very in any sentence won't take away the intended meaning. When you spot very plus an adjective, replace the combination with a single, stronger adjective. If you write in Google search the sentence omitting the word very, you can find many replacements. Check it out next time you spot the word very. So is another word that doesn't do much. Delete it without affecting the sentence meaning. Help plus to. To is optional before an infinitive, and the infinitive for help is usually the later action. Thus, if you deleted or added to, there will be no difference in meaning. Clarity and efficiency, your possible results upon removing to after help. For example, omit information that doesn't emphasize the main purpose. Except for the words I mentioned here, there are more you should recognize and omit. You can discover them yourself later through my sample files or the practice activity. What is your task? Go through a list of wordy phrases and inefficient words and learn them by heart. Slowly read the manuscript and spot these pair words. Tighten or remove the unnecessary to ensure the sentence contains only the essential. Again, you will find a pre-made list on the lesson or course resources. Here is a tip for you. Try searching in your language unnecessary words and repetitions or ambiguous words on Google and grow your list as much as possible. This sums your first editing action. Check the following practice activity for sharpening your skills. I trust you understand now the relevance of efficiency. Still, don't go overboard and brush your teeth while showering. Even efficiency has limits. Anyway, hope you liked this one. See you in the next lesson. Redundancy is the needless repetition of words, phrases, sentences, paragraphs, or ideas. Remember this: repetition is good for humor, not for writing. Repetition is good for remembering, not for writing. Repetition is good for annoying someone, not for writing. Repetition is good for this joke, not for writing. As an editor, you must identify repetition through different angles. That's why this lesson will teach you different forms of repetition in the text. Avoiding redundancy in phrases and words. An action description. She nodded her head in agreement. Those last 4 words can be deleted. What else would she nod but her head? And when she nods, the writer shouldn't add that she agrees. That's obvious. They heard the sound of a train whistle. The sound of can be deleted. Redundant adjectives. In a moment of hopeful optimism, she made the call. Adding 2 positive adjectives is inefficient, and you should remove one. Several words that serve the same purpose. The reason for this is because nobody cares. Stay open-eyed for redundant words and tighten the manuscript as much as possible. To sum it up, your first action in this topic is to check for redundancy in adjectives, actions descriptions, and words with similar meanings. Don't allow sentences to sound like a broken record. Alright? Avoiding redundant details. Sometimes a text has an overabundance of description. How to avoid? Ask yourself, will this amount of details engage the reader, or will it bore him? Can I reduce some details but keep the essence of the point I wish to make? Can I merge some details into one? In a story, it could be the environment description. In an article, it could be a words-packed paragraph without an eye-catching style. And in academic paper, it could be an overuse of examples. And if we're mentioning examples, then avoiding redundant examples. How to avoid? Ask yourself, is it necessary to use 2 examples to emphasize the point? Can I reduce one example but keep the essence of the point I wish to make? Can I merge both examples into one? Usually, one example is enough to strengthen one's point. But if the writer wishes to use various examples, at least try to group them as much as possible. Unite sentences with the same subject. If a short sentence starts with he, she, or it, and the sentence before it is short too, unite them, but only if the new sentence isn't too complex. For example, the wild boar galloped towards the prey. It hasn't eaten for a whole day. Or a better version, the wild boar, who hasn't eaten for a whole day, galloped towards the prey. Instead of writing 2 sentences with the same subject, you should merge both into one cohesive sentence. There is no need to repeat a subject twice unless the sentences are too long. Claim repetition. Writing that repeats the same basic claim without expressing a new reinforcing point of view. For instance, overuse of synonyms to express a point. For example, her stance on issue Z has zero morale. It offends standards of right versus wrong, of decency versus indecency. It stands in the face of that which is good and righteous and noble. None of these synonyms add anything of substance to the text. The reader doesn't even understand why the stance has no morale, and in what specific ways. Thus, the paragraph is redundant. How to avoid? Ask yourself, how many times have I made this point already? Can I reduce the details but keep the essence of the point I wish to make? Except for redundancy of synonyms, a claim repetition can happen by redundancy of counterclaims or examples. Pay attention that every message contains new information within its sentences. Excessive references. Repeated references. Avoid including 2 references for the same quote. For example, at first, I wished I knew my mistakes before they happen, but then I heard what Eleanor Roosevelt once said. If life were predictable, it would cease to be life and be without flavor. Eleanor Roosevelt. In the better version, I omitted the second Eleanor Roosevelt in the brackets. This type of excessive references is problematic yet uncommon. Let's look at some more typical excessive references. Redundant citation numbers. Here are 2 ways to use citation numbers. When citing more than one reference at a time, there should be no spaces between commas or dashes. For example, as you can see, there is no empty spaces inside the brackets. If a sentence has various citation numbers, remove them and add one at the end of the sentence. The footnote should include all words references in it. For example, at the 64th meeting, a draft resolution submitted by 19 member states was voted upon but was not adopted owing to the negative votes of 2 permanent members. In the better version, we removed the 3 citation numbers and added one at the sentence end. What are footnotes? They are brief explanations shown at the bottom of the page, as you can see in the image below. Repeated footnotes. In documents, footnotes are like drawers for long references, but we can shorten these long references when we cite the same source again. The shortened footnote should include author's last name, shortened version of the title, and a cross-reference to the original footnote. For example, the original reference says Peter Leeward Sherlock, Population Aging in Developed and Developing Regions, Implications for Health Policy, Social Science and Medicine, Volume 51, Number 6, 15 in September 2000. Now, the second time we reference this source, I will write the author's last name, Leeward Sherlock, shortened version of the title, Population Aging, and a cross-reference to the original footnote. See Chapter 2, Footnote 3. That's it for the angles of repetition in writing. Note that redundancy can be positive if you don't just copy and paste the same words. It's a great tool for reminding your readers of key information and reinforcing your ideas. The rule is returning to key words and phrases, but not restating basic facts or repeating entire sentences. Next lesson, we will talk about relevancy in writing. Sounds exciting, right? Well, until next time. When I started writing my book, I intended to introduce the environment in the first paragraph. Yet, after many revisions, it was all about how the city got its name rather than its surroundings. Thankfully, I felt something was off and checked the relevance of the chapter. During my inspection, I noticed that the first paragraph's purpose wasn't fulfilled, so I changed it. In this lesson, you will learn what relevant and irrelevant info is and how to find it. How to recognize relevant and irrelevant info. Your first step is to ask what is the main purpose of each chapter in the manuscript. Later, divide the material in each chapter into separate pieces and ask the same question. For example, define the main purpose of Chapter 1, write it down, and separate Chapter 1 into pieces. Next, write the main purpose of each piece in Chapter 1. This process allows us to identify what info contributes to each piece's main purpose and what info to remove. If you are uncertain, ask the writer about his goals behind each piece. Except for a situation when the main purpose opens our eyes to what is missing, there are details that the main purpose won't shine its light upon. For that reason, I gathered some guiding questions to discern overlooked info. Info that its absence might confuse and irritate readers. Is it obvious why or how? The reader wants to know why something happened or how something earned its title. Unless you aim to answer these questions later, you should add this information now and make the situation clearer. In story writing, the writer hides info from the reader to create interest. And as I said, if the writer answers the questions later, then it's alright. The problem happens when the author ignores the questions and leaves them open. However, a writer can't explain every small fact that his story tells. Therefore, you should read the manuscript and see if not knowing why or how something happened may impair the reading experience. Is it obvious where something happened? The writer needs to fill the picture with colors and not leave it in black and white. Make sure it's clear where the situation is happening. Whether it is a story, a history, or a biology book, ensure the background is described. Will an example aid sharpen your point? To gain the reader's trust or to clarify the message, we often add an example. If you are editing academic papers, you can strengthen an argument when it's not impactful enough by adding an example, an essential method for academic writers. If you're editing a story, an example can explain why a character acts in a specific manner. Thus, an example is relevant when trust or clarity is lacking. Like in the last lesson, the target is clear and concise sentences, and removing the irrelevant will bring us closer to this achievement. Omit information that doesn't aid the main goal of each piece. For example, main purpose, a paragraph that describes the Salines Valley. The Salines Valley, a long narrow swale between two ranges of mountains, can be found in Northern California. The few people who live there tend to drink alcohol more often than drinking water. Writing about the residents' drinking habits doesn't serve the main purpose. Thus, you should remove the second sentence. By looking through the glasses called the paragraph's main intent, you gain a new vision that highlights what's relevant or not. Delete information that the reader knows and yet was written again. For example, the day has come to leave town forever. That morning, David's last patrol around town brought up old memories. Because the reader learns that this is the last day for David through the first sentence, the word last is irrelevant. While reading the document, heed that every sentence teaches something new and doesn't repeat old info. In case repetition happened, you can swap it with a reference to the repeated info. That's it for this one. Attempt this lesson practice activity and polish your new glasses of the paragraph's main intent. For now, see you in the next lecture. Hemmingway Editor will make your writing crystal clear and more effective. It pinpoints words and sentences that affect the readability of any paper. Hemmingway Editor's readability score shows the level of education a person needs to understand the text. The lower the grade level is, the better. The tool was named after Ernest Hemingway, a writer characterized by concise language and short declarative sentences. His work is estimated to be between a 4th and 6th grade level of readability. And in this lesson, I will teach you how to use it to enhance readability in writing. The Hemmingway Editor is an online tool that highlights complex sentences, adverbs, and passive voice in your text. It also marks compound words and suggests replacements for them. The online version of Hemmingway Editor is completely free. The desktop version, Hemmingway app, is available for a one-time payment of $20. The online version has all the features the paid version has. But if you wish to donate to the developers, you can do that by buying their desktop app. But before I show you how it works, let me explain why complex sentences, adverbs, and passive voice should be removed or revised. Shorten overloaded sentences. In this busy world full of information, readers tend to favor short sentence length rather than flowery, convoluted prose. Yet, long sentences are crucial for creating variety in writing. What we should avoid are overly long sentences. For example, making a sentence too long can be confusing because it is easy to lose track of what was said at the beginning since they do not give the reader enough time to process what they are reading, and by the end of the sentence, you might have forgotten where it started. That's 51 words with no pause for breath. It would make sense to break it down into 2 shorter sentences. Making a sentence too long can be confusing since you forget the words at the beginning. The reader lacks enough time to process the information, and by the end of the sentence, he forgets where it started. This fragment is a lot easier to read and more engaging. Shorter sentences make it easier to get your message across. And make no mistake, this is true for more advanced readers as well. In the future, we will have a lesson about sentence and word variety, in which I will teach you to use both long and short sentences. Yet, when sentences are overly long, which Hemmingway Editor will warn you of, you will need to trim them. Shorten sentences highlighted in red or yellow on Hemmingway Editor and make the writing clear and concise. Reduce the use of adverbs. Adverbs are a lazy way to tell how an action was made. Instead of using a creative and appealing expression, we add an adverb, expecting the readers to be imaginative for us. For example, saying, "She sang loudly." But how loud did she sing? To answer that, I would rephrase this to, "She sang at the top of her lungs." In the writing world, adverbs have a bad reputation for being weak and unnecessary. For example, run quickly is better stated as sprint. There are plenty of adverb-verb combinations that are often best expressed with a single more meaningful verb, such as driving fast becomes speeding. But even when there isn't a more fitting verb, you still should replace the adverb with an expression. And here is why. Another example. Why don't you come over here and sit by me? She asked flirtiously. The adverb flirtiously tells the reader how she asked the question, when instead it should show how she asked. Why don't you come over here and sit by me? She asked, batting her eyelashes. As an editor, swap adverbs with life-brimming expressions or stronger verbs. Hemmingway Editor will help you do that. As you can see, it highlights adverbs in blue. Reduce the use of passive voice. When writing in a passive voice, we don't have to spend time writing in clear and concise language. It may be a time saver, but it can lead to unclear syntax and stretched sentences. Active voice is superior to passive voice. The reader learns first who acted, what the action was, and finally who or what was affected. It is an easier way to process information. For example, passive voice, the results were analyzed by the government committee. Active voice, the government committee analyzed the results. As an editor, make sure the writer uses passive voice as little as possible. Passive voice is highlighted in green on Hemmingway Editor. Alright, now let's have a look at Hemmingway Editor. Search it on Google and enter the online page. As you can see, overloaded sentences are highlighted in red. Yellow sentences are also too long, but you are not obligated to rephrase them if they are easy to read. Purple words are complex words that might be worth replacing if your audience isn't fluent in English. Adverbs are marked in blue and should be replaced or removed. Let's remove these two and rephrase the sentence. And on your right is how many of each there are. Through here, you can buy the desktop app if you want. If not, copy-paste your manuscript to the online page and do it from there. That's it, everyone. Check this tool through the following practice activity. The next lecture will be on avoiding adjectives, adverbs, and weak nouns. You can't wait? Jump right into the next video. I will be waiting. Like adverbs, adjectives are devoid of creativity. And as Vus Voltaire says, the adjective is the enemy of the noun. But why is that a problem? Well, let me explain. Avoid adjectives and adverbs. Good writing rely on strong nouns and verbs, not adjectives and adverbs. When writers use them, their writing looks lazy, as if they want you to see their world through broken glasses. Even worse, sometimes adjectives and adverbs repeat what readers already know. As an editor, whenever you spot adjectives or adverbs, remove them or replace them with an action. Here are two examples to emphasize my point. John was exhausted. He dropped onto the couch and exclaimed tiredly, "I'm beat." Improved version, John dropped onto the couch. "I'm beat." Another example, "I hate you," Jill blurted furiously. Improved version, "I hate you," Jill said, narrowing her eyes. Except for the alternative of strong nouns and verbs, there exists another better option. You can also replace adjectives or adverbs with a parable. For example, "You look marvelous in this beautiful dress," Harry said amazed. Improved version, "You look like the beauty queen in this dress," Harry said with an open mouth. Tell me that you didn't enjoy reading the improved sentence more. Comparing her looks to a beauty queen makes your writing clever and interesting. Readers enjoy seeing how you linked your message to a different topic, rather than relying on another simple adjective to do your work. Avoid weak nouns. Sometimes a simple noun is all you need. If a scene takes place on a Hawaiian island, beach by itself might be fine if the writer already described Hawaiian beaches. Unless, of course, the characters are visiting a sparkling black sand volcanic beach for the first time. But a more specific noun is almost always better. Let me showcase some examples. For example, a difficult problem might be a quandary, a complication, a dilemma, or a predicament. A habitual liar might be a provocateur, a fabricator, a deceiver, or a trickster. A beach could be the coast, the waterfront, the lakefront, the seaside, or a shovel. As an editor, always aim to have a strong noun that forms the exact image the writer had in mind. Avoid lazy verbs. The same principle applies to verbs. As with nouns, aim for more specific verbs. For example, the verb got. Got is a lazy word because it doesn't tell people how or why the action happened. Instead, use more potent words, such as obtained or earned. This also applies to the words use, make, to be, there is, to have, and any other general word. If you wish to test your creativity and sharpen your writing skills, challenge yourself with the next practice activity. I hope you enjoyed my lesson. See you in the next one. Variety ensures your writing flows better and isn't repetitive and boring. For example, when I'm zigzagging between humor and raw content in my lessons. Since sentences can be diverse in more directions than words, let's start with them first. And I will prepare a salad while doing so. Sentence variety, length. Several sentences of the same length can make for bland writing. One short sentence after another makes your prose sound choppy and childish. Here is an example. Only short sentences. Word and sentence variety is important. Variety helps keep your reader engaged and not bored. Thus, use both long and short sentences. The problem with this paragraph is that all sentences are short. It makes the paragraph repetitive and dull. It's like this cucumber salad I made, expressing laziness and utmost simplicity. Conversely, all long sentences can make your writing hard to read. Here is an example. Only long sentences. In order to compose a piece of writing that engages your reader, it's essential to use variety in both your words and your sentences. To incorporate sentence variety into your next piece of writing, try to use both long and short sentences, in addition to varying your word choice. If your paper lacks variety, it won't be compelling for your reader, who will get bored and possibly even stop reading, so make sure that you include plenty of variety. Whew! This time, the problem was that all sentences were long. Not only can that get repetitive and boring, but also difficult to remember what was said at the start. As this tomato salad lacks diversity, the paragraph lacks length variety. That's why this salad won't be served in any restaurant, and this paragraph won't be written in any blog. But enough about what to avoid. Let me reveal the correct recipe for making a salad. For choosing sentence length. No complex sentences and a variety of both short and long sentences. Vary both words and sentences to keep your reader engaged. Too many short sentences make your writing dull, while too many long sentences can confuse you. Find a balance between both short and long sentences. This paragraph was much easier to read and more engaging. As an editor, see that sentences aren't too long and mix between short and long sentences. And finally, I made a salad I can be proud of. One of the trickiest patterns to spot is that of repetitive sentence structure. Same with length. Overusing a sentence structure can hinder a reader's engagement with a text. Try using a variety of basic sentence structures. We can categorize sentences into 4 main types, depending on the number and type of clauses they contain. Simple. One independent clause. The boy wanted to go outside. Compound. More than one independent clause connected by a coordinating conjunction. I like to read and he likes to write. I like to read and he likes to write are more than one independent clause, and the word and is a coordinating conjunction. Complex. One independent clause and at least one dependent clause. Although he is now 79 years old, he still claims to be 65. He is now 79 years old is the independent clause, and although he still claims to be 65 is the dependent clause. Compound complex. More than one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. After it was all over, my dad claimed he knew we were planning something, but we think he was stunned. 2 independent clauses and 2 dependent clauses in one sentence. Adjusting the sentence structure during an edit is a great way to create effective prose for any author. Sentence variety conjunctions. The most common coordinating conjunctions are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. You can remember them by using the acronym FANBOYS. As an editor, ensure variety of conjunctions in sentences. Now, I will bring fanboys on stage with examples and alternative words. For example, for the holiday, Donnie bought new clothes. Ways to say for: to, in honor of, toward, upon. And example, Shiran brought Dana a birthday present and balloons as gifts. Ways to say and: also, moreover, first, not to mention, plus, including, besides. Nor and or. Example, she did not return that night, nor the night after. Another example, life or death situation. Ways to say nor: neither. Ways to say or: either, else. But and yet. Example, the data was no longer in an Access database but SharePoint lists. Ways to say but and yet: however, although, except, unlike, whereas, and still. So, example, Danny was thirsty so he drank. Ways to say so: therefore, hence, as a result, thus. Sentence variety openings. Vary the way you start sentences to keep the writing interesting and lively. Most of us learned how to write sentences using the following pattern: subject, verb, object. Thus, we expect to read sentences in this order. Using different sentence openers to delay the subject and/or verb of the main clause creates tension and draws interest. For sentence openers, here are some options. Simile. Comparing something to something else. For example, as quiet as a whisper, he turned to me. Preposition. Informs you of the position of someone or something. For example, behind the gate, the road stretched far away. Connectives. Joining words. For example, despite the sunshine, Mr. Tucker was wearing a heavy coat. Time preposition. Moves the time frame to a different point. For example, afterwards, it was clear that he regretted his actions. Participle phrases. For example, shopping at the grocery store, my brother picked up a loaf of bread. That's it for sentence variety. It's shocking how many ways we can vary our sentences, but don't worry, word variety is much simpler. Word variety. Word variety means avoiding repeating words. When you revise the writing, pay attention to repetition in words and replace them with synonyms. After various edits, I can say that repetition of words can often occur in sentence openers. For example, starting several sentences with the, it, or I. Wary for manual search, I discovered a simpler way to spot repeating words. How to spot repeating words? Word Counter, a site that shows keywords density and highlights your overused words in the text. Copy-paste your text and find out your word's appearance percentage. How to find replacements for words? Thesaurus, a site for finding synonyms for all English words. Use it to enrich the vocabulary in your document. Except for learning how to make a successful salad, I hope you enjoyed the lesson about sentence and word variety. Next is fact-checking, another topic that authors sometimes forget, and then you come and save the day. Well, see you in the next lesson. It can be humiliating when readers or important industry contacts catch a blogger or an author making dumb mistakes, like putting Sydney in Austria rather than Australia. Even if unintentionally, these mistakes happen. Both a blogger, an author, and an online publisher should consider reliability and accuracy, and the fitting process is called fact-checking. Sometimes, a writer uses a quote or a fact without enough reference, if at all. As an editor, ensure clarity of who said the quote or fact and on what basis. As web and academic writing are facts-based content, they involve regular fact-checking. And even an ad needs some basis for its facts about the presented product. Some writers are unaware of this, and it's your job to advise them about their missing references. Check your source credibility. There are fact-checking sources for different fields. Thus, you need to identify a trustworthy source related to your material. It could be an expert you spoke with on LinkedIn or a trustworthy website. How to identify a trustworthy website? Check who is the author or team behind the website and read reviews about their website. Review the author's source legitimacy. Ensure the source comes from a globally known institute or reliable person. If it's not obvious, ask the writer for his sources and their credibility. Like I said before, inspect who is the author or team behind the source and read reviews about them. Do other reliable sources challenge these facts? It's advised to check for arguments against a fact the writer used. If you spot one, encourage the writer to deny it. Write the opposite of the fact that you are presenting and see if anyone challenges your fact. Now let me detail deeper what types of facts you need to be aware of. Most common errors: names, titles, place names. Statistics: references to time, distance, date, season, location, and physical descriptions. Argument or narrative that depends on a fact, historical facts, and beware of superlatives like only, first, and most. Superlatives are when we say something is the most, the least, or the only. The problem is, superlative words are setting facts that might change in the future. Thus, you better avoid using them. Some of you might focus on story editing and won't deal with facts. Still, it's crucial to maintain a line of thought that every fact needs a basis, even in a story. I wonder, did the standard editing checklist help build your confidence, or did you already knew all those skills I taught you? Even if you did, this isn't the end of the ride. But before we continue to the books editing checklist, I want to say congratulations on finishing this section. Trust me, by the end of the course, you will feel like an editing expert, and my references are the course's great reviews and the professional content itself. All aboard the books editing checklist.